at the end. This one I feel like hit me the hardest because these are both two people who have lost what they need and they find it in each other. And it's just a really great moment. And as you said, Brooke, you know, Raffi doesn't show a lot of her feelings, whereas Elnor shows all his feelings. And so they needed each other in this moment to balance each other out. It was a great, great scene. I thought it was very touching and very emotional.
Now I really hope that she becomes like a mother figure to him.
I would love to see that. Like have her be almost like a, I mean, he's meant to be quite young, and she has a son who's, you know, we met her son who's expecting his own child. So certainly she's the right age. He's the right age. Like she could really be a mom to him.
Yeah, because he's probably like, I don't know, what, like in his 20s, I guess, like early 20s, probably.
I think so. I think he was real little when Picard first met him, and then it was like 14 years later.
Yeah,
that he sees him again. So I think he was like 20 to 23. He's like in that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Wow, this whole thing's just making me feel emotionally stunted.
Oh.
I was watching him like, all right, wrap it up, guy. Yep, we're sad.
All right, we get it. You're sad,
that's
bro.
Terrible.
I'm a guy. I suck.
You, sir, are no Chris Rios. Besides the fact that you don't care about soccer. Anyway. So from that emotional scene, we see the butterfly fly away again, and we see Picard's face. And then we realize that he is in his study, his, / hollow study, but it's like a colorless version. It's kind of like everything is like a very dark gray kind of color. And he's sort of looking around, doesn't know where he is. And he does, but he doesn't, because it just seems strange because it's colorless. And then he hears Data's voice, and he looks over, and there's Data. And he's asking Data, is it a dream? And Data says, actually, it's a complex simulation. And Data lets him know that he is dead, because he wants to know. And Data, had said something about, dream, it might be like dreaming about him if you do that. And Picard says, I do dream about you all the time. And it's so, anyway, this bit's kind of emotional too. Although Joe may not have any emotions for any of the rest of this either.
No, I was just going to say, I thought that part was really beautiful too.
And, Data asks if he remembers dying, because he doesn't, and Picard kind of explains to him how he feels like, how it felt whenever he died. And they're talking about, what's going on. And this complex simulation is because Soong saved his memory, and and so he's in there with Data now. And Picard's like, I don't like him. And Data calls the Soongs an acquired taste, so that's really amusing. So, he tells Picard, he's like, since you're leaving, and then Picard's kind of like, what? Leaving? What? He's like, I want you to do a favor for me. So the door opens, and Picard gets up to leave, and they are having this touching moment, and then Picard kind of doesn't want to go, because, he's spending time with Data, and it seems like a nice place, I think, for him. And I think maybe at this time he thinks maybe there is a heaven or hell, and that's where he's going. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like he still hasn't realized what Data was saying. And then Data says, will you get rid of, you basically asked him to kill him, where he wants him to get rid of like his remaining like neurons that are hanging around. And because he says mortality gives meaning to life. And it really kind of does. It's
when you know that your existence is finite, when you know that there will come an end to your existence, it does make you think things differently. I mean, people who have no fear of death, and there are people out there who have like zero fear of dying, whatever switch in their brain they have it's off. We see them, right? We call them daredevils, or we see that they're like, they do death-defying things, and whereas most people don't do that. Most people are aware of like, oh, I could die if I do this thing, or I could die, prematurely if I'm not careful with this other thing. And so, for Data to say that mortality gives meaning to life, I mean, this is what Data has been doing. He's been searching for meaning to his existence. Why am I here? Why am I who I am? How can I become more human? And this really is the last step in Data becoming the most human thing possible, is his death. He's done everything else.
Right. And I mean, and he's given life to all these other, life forms. And he, because Picard's kind of not cool with that, but he asked Picard, like, did he regret sacrificing his life for Soji and her homeworld? And Picard's like, absolutely not. And so that's kind of, like, so Data really didn't, feel bad for, if he really could have felt bad for sacrificing himself for Picard, and then now it's like he hasn't actually died, so he's just milling around. And as I was redoing my notes and watching it again, Cindy goes, God, he must be bored.
What did you guys think of the way that Data looked in it?
I thought it looked better than in the dream in episode 1.
I agree with that.
Way
There's
better.
still just something wrong with that wig.
Oh, that wig
It's
was
just
so bad.
weird. Like, his hair looked terrible before the wig always looked bad, but like, it's almost like, before it was like, oh, it's a robot with hair, with a fake hair, but now it's a wig. Like, it's totally two different things.
Yeah, no, I agree. The wig is not great. I did read that Data's face, they because of course Brent Spiner is aged in real time.
Yeah.
They kept him looking more like his original Data through a mixture of makeup and CGI.
Right.
So they not completely CGI DH him, not complete makeup either. But I think that this looks way better than that Data we saw in episode 1.
Yeah, and that was okay because that was like this weird fever dream he had kind of thing.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
I have dreams with people in them, and sometimes they're who they really look like, and sometimes they're supposed to be, like, it might be Rebecca, but it looks like, I don't know, my mom
like
instead or whatever.
Distorted version, right?
Yeah, or like it looks like Rebecca, but her hair is green or whatever. Like, or it could just look like Rebecca, but her name is Soji. That's her sister. I should have, for the joke, actually said one of your sister's names. Anyway. Especially since you and Janine looks very much alike.
We do. It's true.
Anyway, so yeah, this was, like, I thought that was an emotional bit. And then we come back to it in a minute and it's emotional again, It's like, what are you doing to me? So after with Data, Picard wakes up. He's in the golem. It's very like Wizard of Oz because they're all standing around looking at him as he's waking up. We got Soji and Jurati and Soong, and it looks like he's in a glass top tanning bed, and he's wearing these little shorts. That's like old school Picard, like
it looks
on
like he's playing basketball in the 70s.
Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's hanging out trying to read his book. And
I mean,
so
we talked about this last week, Brooke, you and I. We said they're probably going to put Picard in the Golem, and I know I wasn't a fan of the idea, but I said they'll probably do it. So now that they've done it, what do you think of Picard being an android? I mean, he's an android now. I mean, yeah.
I was not a fan to begin with, and then when I watched this the first time, I was just like, ugh. Like, I couldn't really get into some of the feels either, because I knew that I just knew that was what was going to happen, because that's why Agnes was acting weird, because she wanted to do that anyway, like, not that just did it as soon as they thought about it after they beamed down. It was like, that's something she wanted to do anyway. And when we get to the end of the scene, so, he wakes up and then they show him at the table and they're talking. I guess the way around it is that, they gave him just about as many years as he would have lived anyway if he were healthy. Everything works, so he can do stuff. He doesn't have super strength or anything, so he's basically the same guy without the brain tumors, but he's been built instead of born. So it's better than it could have been, because I did not like some sort of like super strength eternal Picard and then just go into like all of these stunt doubles throwing people around and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah,
like
that's what I was thinking with it too, is that I didn't like the idea of them, okay, for sure Picard's going to end up in this. He has a terminal illness. They're showing this golem. For sure he's going to end up there. And I think the way that they handled this, saying that they came up with some algorithm that give him so that the body would naturally degrade in about the same amount of years and everything's the same except that, he doesn't have this brain abnormality. And after seeing it on the screen like that, it worked. It worked for me. And I think that that's really the only way they could have done it, is saying, hey, basically you can almost forget that he's an android and saying, oh, they just did a medical procedure that saved his life. And it's like, yeah, by transferring his consciousness into what is essentially, it's a synthetic body, but it's going to live about as long as his natural body would have anyway. So it's almost like it equals itself out or something.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having just an artificial heart, he has a whole artificial body.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, like, my fear of that they were going to put him in the golem was like, oh, now he'll live another 300 years or whatever.
Exactly.
And I was like, ugh, I do not want that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly Picard didn't want that either. Like, one of the things that Data had expressed on the Next Generation was he, here he had made friends. He expected to outlive his friends and then make new friends and then outlive those friends. And then like basically this never ending cycle of making friends and then watching them all die around him. So it's like we can't imagine Picard wanting to live another 100 years and watching everybody he served with on the Enterprise die, even though they were like younger than him. Like, can you imagine him going like to Wesley Crusher's funeral? And it's like, oh, what the heck? Like, that's
like, you finally shut up and now I'm sad.
Finally shut up, Wesley. Like, it's so exactly. Except now I'm sad about it. But like, I do, even though this is not what I would have preferred, like you, Joe, the fact that they gave it all of these caveats of like, you're only going to live as long as you would have lived without the brain tumor. You don't have super strength. They did not turn him into like the $6 million man. Like he can't, like, he doesn't have super hearing. He can't like, see through walls and fly like Superman. Like, he doesn't have any of those abilities. He's a regular guy in a android body and he'll live.
Why now? I'm sorry. I just said a Star Wars joke in there. That's from a movie that people didn't like. Anyway, I mean, that was one of your parts to me. And since I've already interrupted you, I totally liked where Picard jokes about not minding having an extra 10 or 20 years.
Yes, I enjoyed that too. But yeah,